Sam and Beth, let's continue because Sam, you mentioned something before the break about this idea of, I think I wrote it down as dads modeling proper masculinity and sort of this idea of, well, let's sort of restore this culture of how to do that. And I want to ask you, how do we do that? Kind of this idea of restoring a sense of brotherhood and a sense of, well, this is what it means to be a healthy, good man today. What do you see as the role of that idea of positive masculine brotherhood, either on college campuses or in other spheres?
So we need to talk about it in both sets of spheres. And there is quite a bit of research that shows that young boys aged 6 to 7 through about 12, that is when a lot of these ideas about who they are in terms of their gender and their role tend to solidify. So we can start doing this and modeling this, as early as that. And there's no reason not to. And I'll tell you a story that I've been thinking about that never really hit until recently, which was I was a member of a synagogue. It wasn't a deeply religious synagogue, but it was very deeply community focused. And before a number of holidays, the men's club would put together various food packages, care packages, and it was important that my brother and I went with these men and sort of scattered throughout the Philadelphia region, which is where I'm from, and we would develop this. Looking back at those moments, those men who were in those men's clubs are younger than I am today. These were men in their 30s. I did not realize that. I did not appreciate that 20 some odd years ago when this was happening. What I realized today is that those men were giving back. Those men were modeling everything. And I am so grateful for that, because had those sorts of things not happened, I would not be who I am today. And I'm very grateful again for that. We can model this in elementary school and middle school. We can also model this on college and university campuses. One of the things I've been writing about and thinking about is, how do we do this nowadays on college and university campuses? I don't want to create more bureaucracy immediately at all. I think that's a mistake. I don't want to fold this into the approach that the DEI offices have taken for years. I don't want to create a men's center the way we have women's centers. The idea is instead, what resources do we have that we could bring to our university campuses? And there are many. When I was in college at Stanford, I had many friends who were members of the LDS church, and at least 2 nights a week, they would disappear and they would go to church functions. And I would often ask, what do you guys do? What are you doing there? And they wouldn't give me all the details. They said they couldn't, not a problem. But I share it because I said, so why do you go? And they never went out of a sense of obligation or some form of religious determinism. They went because it was meaningful, special, and they said they would have a great time. It was social. And this is where those values were propagated and perpetuated. We already have institutions like the Church of Latter-day Saints, like Jewish organizations, like Catholic organizations, like Muslim organizations. These things already exist. We should be welcoming them on campus, not for any form of radicalization, of course, but to say, we have community organizations here. Let's connect. Let's model the behavior with these pre-existing institutions. I have hopefully a piece coming out about Masons. I was in the Masons for quite a few years, and there was a Masonic chapter established at Harvard where I was as a graduate student. It grew to about 500 students. And within a period of months, I wasn't alone. There were people scattered throughout the Boston and Cambridge area of all walks of life, finance, medicine, mechanics. They knew everything. They had connections everywhere, from police officers to what have you. And you could connect to them. They would tell you their stories. And by spending time with them, they modeled their behavior for you. And you knew you weren't alone, and you would get a course correction. You would complain, you would explain something, and the guys would say, hey, wait a minute, are you sure you're thinking about that correctly? So on and so forth. So these organizations exist. They're plentiful. Let's use them, whether they're fraternal, whether they're religious, what have you. Let's invite them and let's connect with them, because the men on our campuses need them desperately.
Sam, something that feels challenging to me on this issue is, we come back to this idea of community and brotherhood, as being so critically important. And it feels like so many of us find that in religion, the institutions of religion. But it's hard to kind of go out with this public message and say, yes, you should go join a religion. I mean, it's just for people who are not already embracing those ideas, that's not a message that is very welcomed, and so I question the extent to which this solves the problem for people who are experiencing the challenge of being disconnected in the first place. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? How do you get over that hurdle?
Absolutely. So first, they don't necessarily need to be religious organizations. And I understand the stigma and the biases associated with that. I also believe, riffing off of Robert Putnam, who was one of my mentors in graduate school, that religion isn't a building. It isn't even a faith. It's a collection of people. And the fact is that if we can separate for a minute some of the religious practices and and certain community traditions from the idea that we're here to connect with you in some sort of way, that can be very, very powerful. There are large numbers of Jewish students on campus who identify simply as Jewish, but they don't identify as religious or practicing or engaging in any way. When we survey them, and we've been doing that for years, especially after the October 7th massacres, the students regularly say they're looking for something. It doesn't mean they're looking to practice in any traditional way. They're looking to connect in a meaningful way. So I hear you. I think you're absolutely right. But I also think the time is also right that if we have faith-based organizations that reach out now, there may be a very wide open window to still connect, not necessarily on religious practice and religious belief, but on certain cultural beliefs and value beliefs. And we are certainly seeing that. I'll give you an example. Chabad, which is a very religious group, not my group, has connected with so many Jewish students in the last 2 years because they were simply there. They extended a hand on campuses to students who needed it. And Chabad, I want to be very clear, does not proselytize and does not judge and does not try to force any form of religious practice down any of the Jewish students' throats. It's literally, we're here for you. And that message has resonated like nobody's business over the last couple of years. So this is not saying we need to introduce religion explicitly. I don't have a problem with faith and religion that way, but I think it can be done effectively if we separate them just a little bit. Because again, what's very clear is our students are hurting and they're looking for something.
So it's almost like a shift to the celebration of community and connection and saying, these institutions, faith offer that, but there are other places you can find this as well. And students may find their way to faith institutions as a result.
Absolutely.
Sam and Beth, that comment reminds me of an event we did at Sutherland a couple years ago. We held a religious freedom, kind of the role of faith in public life event down at BYU campus. And I was moderating a panel, and I asked our our constitutional law and religious freedom scholar, Bill Duncan, this question, because we were talking about this very thing, this idea of community and connection in the context of faith institutions. And I kind of joked with him and said, well, a brother of mine, loves CrossFit, and he's joked with me that CrossFit is his religion, and he goes religiously and loves it, has a great sense of community. And I asked Bill, I'm like, is that just as good as sort of a religious affiliation? And at some point, we might have to bring Bill on and maybe discuss or even debate a little bit, because he said, that there are a lot of great benefits associationally of other organizations, but he was pointing out that, if memory serves, there is some evidence in the research that there is something a little bit unique about organizations that do kind of have that theological faith component. And so I say that in the context that could there be a message, and Sam, I'd love to hear how you would articulate this, but could there be a message that faith institutions, here are all the various things they provide to young people. One of those is, of course, for the theological faith-based institutions, that sort of connection to the divine. Other benefits can be connection to each other, connection to society. So is there a way to craft a message of, here's all that you can have access to, and then folks can sort of pursue what resonates with them, hoping they will be pulled into this broader constructive community? How would you articulate a message that weaves all that together as sort of a pitch, if you will, to young people?
So I wouldn't pitch to young people because I think they're going to be a little afraid of that. I think if they think it's too manicured and too massaged and so on, they're going to be a little scared, saying it's coming from some big corporate office and so on. I think it actually has to be localized and authentic. And that is, if there are a handful of folks who are already involved, they're going to be the ones who need to reach out and make those connections. What our students need today more than anything is a sense of authenticity and a sense of reality. They see so much through the digital world. They are bombarded with unending messages. And we know literally every other week a poll comes out showing how little trust in institutions they already have. So my concern is, I think you're raising a very good point. But at the same time, if we have something that looks like it's coming again from some central office, like if the American Jewish Committee here in New York says, let's have this pitch, you're going to have people run in the other way, the other direction. Whereas in many cases, this has to be a one at a time, very slow grassroots sort of movement and say, look, hi, I'm Sam. I'm part of this. You want to come have a meal with me, or do you want to go do, we're doing this activity on Sunday, come with me, something like that. And it will build and build and build. That I think is probably the better way to do it. It's hard to plan, right? And it's not as attractive to say that, because it's not like I'm going to spend $10,000, we'll create a shiny campaign. But I think with our students today, and I'm just trying to be as honest as I can with 2 decades of being a college professor, I tend to think that stuff doesn't resonate as well as I would hope. And it's that authentic connection that often works, and it builds and builds and builds. If you have 8 or 10 kids getting together on a Friday for a Sabbath Shabbat dinner, and it goes well, everyone try to bring a friend the next time and build it up, build it up. I don't think they'll respond to an email or a coupon in the mail or a shiny poster. I think they'll just be like, what is this? But if it's my buddy says, hey, come with me and we had a good time, those benefits I think will accrue. So unfortunately, I think it's a slow building slog rather than a snap my fingers and have a big simple policy solution. I think these communities have to be rebuilt with care. Our students are very shattered, especially the men. Baby steps literally to rebuild and to work. And before we run out of time, one of the things the boys' schools say here in New York that I have observed, even with my own son, is that they are fixated on the idea of relational learning and the idea that if you want to help a boy thrive, if you want to inspire a young boy, how do we make that boy dream big and be creative? They have to feel a connection to the teacher or someone in the school or some person that sort of inspires them. And when I first heard about this a couple of years ago, because there's a huge body of research, I went, oh my God, because I can tell you every person going back to kindergarten, and I'm still in my 40s, of who I wanted to show off to and have that, because I had that relationship with them. I wanted to make them proud. So I think the same thing actually applies amazingly when you get to college, which is you do have to create those relationships. The students have to create them slowly and gradually. And I think the speed of which you can grow groups will, obviously accelerate when you have larger numbers. But I think it really requires that very narrow and personal relationship as a starting point. So that's where I'm thinking right now, and I'm trying to be practical about it. Just again, given how I've watched, groups form and fail and initiatives form and fail for over 2 decades now on campuses around the country.
Thanks for watching that clip of Defending Ideas. For the full conversation, click the link in the description and make sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your shows.